Okay, we're going to look at just the first half of H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald today, and it's on page 20 of your blue anthology. We'll check the ring numbers against the article 10s, he explained, pulling a sheaf of yellow paper from his rucksack and unfolding two of the official forms that accompany captive bred rare birds throughout their lives. Don't want you going home with the wrong bird. The few things that you can say about this first paragraph. I just want to show you how you can say a lot about a little, and the idea that actually you can make some points about things that you might have just skimmed over before. First of all, let's just look at that second word, check. He says, we'll check the ring numbers against the article 10s. I think one of the things that does is it just kind of foreshadows that something's going to go wrong. The idea that here we are, we're starting off at the beginning of the text. It says, we'll check something. Obviously something's going to be wrong, a mistake is going to be made, there's going to be some confusion, and that's exactly what happens. And if you look at the end of that paragraph as well, look at what he says, don't want you going home with the wrong bird. Well, of course, that's kind of like almost what happens, isn't it? So it's kind of foreshadowing the idea that something's going to go wrong later. Just that word check, that verb check, you can pick up on there. The mention of the article 10s is also kind of quite interesting, because it's use of technical terminology. I mean, I don't know what an article 10 is. But obviously if I bred rare birds, I would. Okay, it's some kind of like official legal document of some sort. And so it presents him as an expert, doesn't it? So in terms of how the people are represented here, that technical terminology represents him as an expert, doesn't it? There's also some direct speech in this paragraph, isn't there? And you could kind of think, well, okay, so how is MacDonald using that? And I think she's using the direct speech so that we feel as if we're there. It creates a sense of immediacy, you could say. It makes the reader feel engaged and make the reader feel present in the situation because you're hearing directly what people are saying word for word. It doesn't just say article 10s and not explain what they are, it glosses what they are. So like a glossary is where you get the words, and at the bottom of the text it says what the definitions are. But writers also gloss while they're writing. So if they're mentioning a word or a phrase that they know a reader will be unfamiliar with, then they'll just say what it is afterwards or use it in context in a way that makes it clear what it is. So here it says, we'll check the ring numbers against the article 10s, he explained, pulling a sheaf of yellow paper from his rucksack and unfolding two of the official forms that accompany captive bred rare birds throughout their lives. It's obviously some official form and it explains what it is there roughly, doesn't it? Okay, and that's called glossing. And one of the things that you could say there is that you could think about the purposes of the text. So any text is going to have more than one purpose. And obviously this is to narrate or to recount, to tell a story about something that's happened. There's also an element of entertainment, maybe. The purpose is to entertain, because there are moments during this passage where you laugh a little bit. Later on, particularly, when she's this kind of wild woman standing there looking really disturbed, maybe there's a bit of humour in there. So what have we said? To narrate, to recount, to entertain, obviously to describe. There's a lot of description in there. So think of your purpose words: to narrate, to recount, to entertain, to describe. That bit is to inform, isn't it? So it gives you some information so that we're actually learning something about hawks, about the processes of breeding and selling and passing on rare birds, rather than just it being some sort of vague story. We're actually getting some information. We're learning something through reading this as well. There's a sense of information. Okay, let's read the second paragraph. We noted the numbers. We stared down at the boxes, at their parcel tape handles, their doors of thin plywood and hinges of carefully tied string. Then he knelt on the concrete, untied a hinge on the smaller box and squinted into its dark interior. A sudden thump of feathered shoulders and the box shook as if someone had punched it hard from within. She's got her hood off, he said, and frowned. That light leather hood was to keep the hawk from fearful sights, like us. There's so much you can get from these paragraphs. I'm just going to try and pick out a couple of things. I would pick out the word thump. And it's in italics, and later on it's used in italics as well, isn't it? And we could mention that it's an example of onomatopoeia. Yeah, so it's a word that sounds like the sound it's describing. And I think it maybe sort of creates a sense of the power of the hawk, how strong it is. It's okay, it might not be physically huge, but the power, the noise that it's making inside the box. And it creates a sense of tension, a sense of suspense as well. The darkness does that as well, doesn't it? The fact that we can't actually see inside the box to start with. It's all taped up, and then it says, what does it say? Then he knelt on the concrete, untied a hinge on the smaller box, and squinted into its dark interior. That darkness there makes it seem all that little bit more mysterious, doesn't it? And maybe a little bit more dangerous. So it creates that sense of mystery and suspense, the darkness there, I think, doesn't it? And then as the passage goes on, there's more and more tension that starts building, isn't there? And particularly, one of the things here is the fact that the hawk's got its hood off, isn't it? So it says that light leather hood was to keep the hawk from fearful sights, full stop, like us, full stop. Just a 2-word sentence, a minor sentence, M-I-N-O-R. So a minor sentence is one that shouldn't really be one. You can't really, there's no verb in there. It doesn't really make sense on its own, like us, does it? So it's a minor sentence. But the reason why it's there is that it creates that tension and that suspense in that moment, because you kind of think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? The bird is afraid. It could, it's unpredictable. We don't know how this bird is going to react at this moment. Let's carry on. Line 11. Another hinge untied, concentration, infinite caution. Notice the minor sentences there again, just a single word, another 2 words. These short sentences make it feel really tense, almost breathless in terms of the feel and the mood of it, isn't it? Daylight irrigating the box, scratching talons, another thump, and another thump. The air turns syrupy, slow, flecked with dust, the last few seconds before a battle. Now that's a metaphor, obviously. It's not literally a battle, but it's setting up this potential conflict between the hawk and the people. Yeah. Again, sort of that adds to that tension and that sense of danger, doesn't it? And talks about, I think, how she and the man are feeling at that moment as well. I think, think of how nervous you would be. You appreciate the danger that you're going to go into, that you could lose your life. She's exaggerating, but she's using that sort of exaggeration in order to create the tension at this point. And with the last bow pulled free, he reached inside, and amidst a whirring, chaotic clatter of wings and feet and talons, and a high-pitched twittering, and it's all happening at once, the man pulls an enormous, enormous hawk out of the box, and in a strange coincidence of world and deed, a great flood of sunlight drenches us, and everything is brilliance and fury. The first thing I want to say, notice how long that sentence is. So we've gone from these really, really short sentences, just 1 and 2 word minor sentences. Suddenly there's this like 3-4 line sentence, isn't there, that just goes on and on and on and on. And in particular, there's loads of ands, and. Look, and it's all happening all at once. Out of the box, and in a strange coincidence of world and deed. A great flood of sunlight drenches us, and everything is brilliance and fury. Now this and is called polysyndetic coordination. Polysyndetic coordination. And you could say, well, okay, so what's the effect of that? Okay, and it creates this sense of, maybe it creates this sense of time slowing down, like as if there's so much packed into this short space. Maybe it does that. Maybe it also creates a sense of chaos. There's so much happening all at once. So it creates kind of quite a chaotic feel. Maybe it adds to the tension again. But try and make a point about the use of polysyndetic coordination there. There's more use of italics, isn't there, with the word enormous being in italics, and it's repeated as well, isn't it, the word. That's when you get the same word repeated immediately, one word after the other. That's called epizeuxis, which is E-P-I-Z-E-U-X-I-S, epizeuxis. So it says the man, it says on line 16, the man pulls an enormous hawk. And so the epizeuxis creates that sense of just disbelief. How can it be this big? Is kind of like the impression, isn't it? And the italics as well create that sense of the tone of voice, the way in which it's being said. Enormous. Yeah, so you can hear the tone. You can hear the prosodic features of the writer. Prosodic. The prosodic features of something means how it sounds in terms of volume or pitch or intonation. Prosodic. P-R-O-S-O-D-I-C. So that's why the italics are there at that point. Let's carry on. The hawk's, this is line 18, is it? The hawk's wings, barred and beating, the sharp fingers of her dark-tipped primaries cutting the air, her feathers raised like the scattered quills of a fretful porpentine. Two enormous eyes, my heart jumps sideways. She is a conjuring trick, a reptile, a fallen angel, a griffin from the pages of an illuminated bestiary. It might be worth looking at some of these descriptions and metaphors here. She is a conjuring trick as a metaphor, isn't it? What does that mean? Well, it kind of means she's magical, she's mysterious. You almost can't understand how so much power and mystery can be contained in one being. You know, a magic trick, a conjuring trick doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't appear real. And then a reptile suggests that she's not literally a reptile, but it kind of suggests that she's cold and heartless, or that's how she comes across, you know, like a dinosaur or whatever. And then a fallen angel. Well, Satan is a fallen angel. So what does that suggest? That she's evil, that she's powerful, that she's dangerous, those kind of things maybe. So look at some of those metaphors and work out what you'd say about them. Something bright and distant, like gold falling through water. Can you see there's so much you can pick out here? It's so full of imagery, isn't it? Look at this. You've got to see, we've had some metaphors. Now we've got a simile. She's like gold falling through water. What does that make you think of? Like gold falling through water. She's precious. She's valuable. There's something almost kind of quite magical and sparkling and beautiful about her. You know, think of the simile. Think of what does that suggest? How is MacDonald using that? What's she trying to say about the hawk? A broken marionette of wings, legs and light-splashed feathers. She is wearing jesses and the man holds them. For one awful long moment she is hanging head downward, wings down. Like a turkey in a butcher's shop. Another simile, we'll come back to that in a minute. Only her head is turned right way up and she is seeing more than she has ever seen before in her whole short life. Let's just look at that simile then. Like a turkey in a butcher's shop. I think it maybe makes it relatable. So we might have never seen a bird of prey close up, and we might never have seen one hanging upside down, but we might have seen a turkey or a chicken hang upside down in the butcher's shop. So it's to do with using a relatable image. Think about in Between a Rock and a Hard Place. Aaron Ralston does that quite a bit, doesn't he? He says a refrigerator chockstone. So you might be able to picture quite how big the rock is, but if you think, it's like a fridge. Or doesn't he at one point say about like the size of a large bus tyre? So he uses these relatable images, and Helen MacDonald is doing that again, so that we might have never been in exactly this situation, but by relating it to something from our everyday lives and experience, she's hoping that we can. Then we've got this bit about what the hawk can see, okay, and it says, this is from line 26 onwards, it says, her world was an aviary no larger than a living room. Then it was a box. Notice that really short sentence. Then it was a box. But now it is this, and she can see everything. The point source glitter on the waves, a diving cormorant 100 yards out, pigment flakes under wax on the waves, on the lines of parked cars, far hills and the heather on them, and miles of sky where the sun spreads on dust and water and illegible things moving in it that are white scraps of gulls. Everything startling and new stamped on her entirely astonished brain. Notice how there's lots of that polysyndetic coordination there again, isn't there? And. But look at the length of the sentence is the first main thing I want to pick out there. Is, look, you've got a really short sentence, then it was a box. And then this really long sentence, she can see this, and then beyond that she can see that, and that, and that, and that in the tiniest detail, and then this, and that, and that. This is really long sentence, just all the things that are kind of like she can see with her eyes. And it's astonishing, and she's astonished. And I suppose the length of the sentence mirrors the contrast between her world, which was really tight and enclosed and restricted, to now her world, which becomes huge and almost kind of like impossible to cope with from her point of view. So the length of the sentence and the contrast between the really short sentence and then the really long one kind of mirrors or reflects the shift in perspective of the hawk. Okay, make sure you've got some notes on that, and then have a go at writing about it, because in the exam you're not going to need to listen to me talking about it, you are going to need to write about it. So make sure you've got some notes on that, and then have a go at writing about it in some paragraphs. You know, give yourself, what would you have, like quarter an hour to write about half of this? See how many of those points you can get down in quarter an hour to practice doing exactly what you need to do in the exam.